The only thing faster than Amazon Prime delivery around here is a fresh violation notice from the Committee of Perpetual Grumpy People, or as they officially call themselves, the Creekside Commons Homeowners Association. Seriously. I was still peeling the sticker off a new box of bulk coffee filters when the envelope landed on my welcome mat. An envelope so crisp and white it looked like it was laminated with pure spite. My name is Calvin Thorne, Cal to the 3 people who like me, and I'm a resident of Creekside, USA. And let me tell you, living here is less about commons and more about common decency evaporating rapidly into the suburban ether. I tore the seal. Inside, the paper was thick, glossy, and smelled faintly of expensive laser toner and the absolute certainty of my impending financial doom. Subject: Class A, aesthetic violation. Immediate action required, aesthetic violation. I swear these people think they're running Versailles. I scanned the paragraph, the font size practically daring me to fight back. You are hereby notified that your residential property, specifically the asphalt surface of the private driveway apron, contains a minor yet aesthetically displeasing asphalt depression. This depression constitutes a breach of Section 4.c Re, Surface Integrity, of the Creekside Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions, CCNRs. A depression. A breach. It's a goddamn pothole, people. It's maybe 2 feet wide and deep enough to collect enough water to drown a nervous squirrel. It appeared back in the spring after that freak cold snap, and yes, I'd been meaning to fix it. But the real kicker was the bottom line. The penalty structure. Fine schedule. Initial assessment fee. Due 7 days. $750. Daily accrual starting day. $7,500 day. $750. For a hole that I could cover with a dinner plate and a slightly larger coaster. This wasn't about property values, this was about power. And when you think about power in Creekside Commons, you're thinking about one person, President Patricia Stone. Patricia Stone is a woman whose spirit animal is a clipboard and whose favorite color is beige vengeance. She lives 2 doors down, meaning she has a direct line of sight and judgment onto my entire existence. She monitors the shrubbery growth with the zeal of a CIA satellite analyst. I swear she must have taken a high-resolution photo of my driveway crater, zoomed in to count the individual gravel bits, and then rushed back to her lair, which I assume is lined entirely with compliance binders, to print this out. I crushed the letter in my hand. My blood pressure, which usually runs at a smooth, sarcastic cruise, was spiking. $750 plus $75 a day for a driveway dimple. Fine. They want aesthetic improvement? They want me to fix the hole? I'll fix the hole. But I'm not just going to drop some boring, gray, ugly asphalt patch in there. Oh no. If I'm going to pay a fine for being aesthetically displeasing, I am going to make the replacement so aesthetically pleasing that it will melt Patricia Stone's cold, regulation-compliant heart. Or, failing that, cause her a massive paperwork-induced stroke. The game was officially on. The saga of the pothole, which I affectionately named the abyss of non-compliance, started innocently enough. This wasn't some geological fault line. It was just bad maintenance from the original tract developer back in summer 2024. We had a week of relentless heavy rain that summer, followed by 2 days of blistering, pavement-cracking heat. Boom. I rolled the Subaru over it one evening, heard that familiar, horrible thunk, and there it was, a perfect saucer-sized depression just past the curb. I'll admit, my initial response was peak suburban apathy. I figured I'd get to it. You know how it goes. You grab a bag of cold patch asphalt from Home Depot, throw it in the back of the car, and then it sits in your trunk for 3 months, rattling around and smelling vaguely of oil and procrastination. That's what happened. I was going to fix it, eventually. But the HOA, specifically Patricia, doesn't deal in eventually. She deals in today, preferably before 5 o'clock p.m. My first legitimate attempt to fix it, back in late September 2024, involved calling professional asphalt guys. I looked up concrete and asphalt solutions near me and landed on a company called Tony's Tough as Nails Paving. "Hello, Cal Thorne here," I said when Tony, a man who sounded like he smoked gravel for breakfast, answered. "I have a small pothole, driveway patch, 2 feet wide, maybe 6 inches deep." "2 feet wide," Tony echoed, his voice dropping an octave. "Sir, that's not a pothole. That's a surface integrity compromise." See? Even the contractors are trained in HOA speak. "Right. Look, just a patch. How much we talking?" He paused for dramatic effect. "For a job of that complexity, we gotta mobilize the specialized resin polymer unit, gotta seal the substrate, plus the travel time for the crew." He rattled off a bunch of nonsense words. "We're looking at $1,200, minimum." $1,200 to fill a hole that I could pee in and still have room left over. I politely declined, citing an unexpected urgent need to purchase 3 years' supply of ramen noodles. "Well, you call us back when you're serious about pavement integrity, pal," Tony grumbled before hanging up. Defeated but undeterred, I tried one last time to appeal to reason. This led to interaction 2, the HOA negotiation. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of night where the air smells like cut grass and crushed dreams. The Creekside Commons meeting room is in the clubhouse basement, painted that nauseating pale green color that screams, "You are trapped here forever, and we are watching you." Patricia Stone, dressed in a sensible navy blue blazer and a crisp white blouse, the uniform of pure, unadulterated neighborhood tyranny, sat at the head of a long table, flanked by her 2 silent, perpetually nervous cronies. I stood up during the Resident Concerns section. "Good evening, President Stone, board members," I began, trying for a tone of reasonable civic engagement. "I'm here to discuss the violation notice regarding my driveway at 1442 Birchwood, the pothole." Patricia didn't even look up from her notes. "Mr. Thorne, the violation is valid. You have been assessed the Class A fee. Do you have documentation that the repair has been scheduled and the fine has been paid?" "Well, no. That's why I'm here. I got a quote for $1,200 for a minor patch. Given that the driveway connects directly to the common community road, and that the initial damage was likely due to substandard drainage from the main curb line, which is HOA responsibility, I'd like to propose a shared cost solution. Say 50-50. A small gasp escaped from one of the cronies. The suggestion that the HOA might spend money instead of extract it was clearly shocking. Patricia finally lifted her head. Her face was a mask of practiced professional disdain. "Mr. Thorne, your personal driveway apron, as defined in Section 3B2, is unequivocally the sole responsibility of the homeowner. The pothole is a result of wear, tear, and owner negligence. Furthermore," she tapped her pen ominously, "your suggestion of cost sharing is highly disruptive and delays this meeting's critical agenda item, the new mandate for low-level, high-efficiency amber LED lighting for all birdbath features." She gave me the killer look, the one that says, "I'm not fighting you. I'm simply waiting for you to realize you've already lost." So you're not willing to budge on the $750 fine? I asked, leaning slightly on the table, my reasonable facade cracking like old plaster. I am not. In fact, due to your disruptive public commentary and the imposition on the board's time, she stated, her voice icy, I am amending the assessment to reflect the maximum allowable penalty under Class A. The initial assessment is now $1,000. You have until Friday to demonstrate remediation, or the daily accrual begins Monday. I just stared at her. The sheer petty malice of it took my breath away. She had not only refused to negotiate, she had tripled the fine for the crime of talking back. You know what, Patricia, I said, giving up completely on politeness. $1,200 for asphalt? $1,000 for a fine? That is simply highway robbery. And you know what else? That pothole is going to get fixed. Permanently. And I promise you, when I'm done, it will be the most talked about aesthetic feature in this entire beige, soul-sucking neighborhood. I turned on my heel and left the meeting, hearing the hushed, terrified whispers of the other residents as I stormed out. The fine was officially $1,000. The clock was ticking. And now, thanks to Patricia, I had a vendetta that required not just a repair, but an act of artistic, suburban terrorism. The brewing storm? It wasn't brewing anymore. It was a Category 5 hurricane of DIY revenge. The next day, October 2024, I was utterly defeated. $1,000 down the drain before I even started the repair. I drove to the biggest, soullessest hardware store in the county, aimlessly wandering the aisles. I needed something cheap, durable, and fast. I was looking at cement bags, patch kits, and maybe some spray paint to draw a crude, sarcastic mural over the hole. But that felt too temporary, too fleeting. Patricia needed something that would last, something that screamed, I follow the rules, but I hate every fiber of your being. I stopped in the paint and chemical aisle, where the resin kits live. You know, the stuff people use to seal wood bar tops, or make those weird, slightly sticky river tables. I was staring blankly at a gallon of 2-part epoxy when my eyes drifted sideways. There, on a low shelf, right next to the glitter and the tiny dollhouse accessories, was a display for hobbyist water features. And nestled amongst the plastic moss and miniature fences were the true heroes of this story. A school of incredibly realistic, tiny toy fish. They were perfect. They looked like little koi and guppies, maybe 2 inches long, with vibrant orange and blue stripes. They were meant for resin crafts, meant to look like they were swimming in clear, still water. Wait a minute. The thought hit me with the force of 1,000 angry HOA bylaws. They want aesthetic improvement. A regular asphalt patch is boring. A pond is an upgrade. A custom-poured, maintenance-free, drivable koi pond permanently set into the driveway surface. It was structurally sound. It would be solid as a rock. Aesthetically captivating, arguably, and completely not a water hazard, because it was solid plastic. I felt a genuine maniacal grin stretch across my face. This wasn't just a repair, this was a statement. This was art. This was the abyss of non-compliance, reborn as a magnificent, tiny, immortal fish sculpture. I immediately grabbed everything I needed. Epoxy. I started grabbing the biggest containers of crystal-clear, premium deep-pour epoxy resin. I needed enough volume to fill a 6-inch deep, 2-foot-wide cylinder. That turned out to be nearly 7 full gallons of Part A and Part B. My cart looked like I was building an aquarium for a giraffe. UV stabilizer. Patricia Stone. Can't have the aesthetic value fading, can she? I bought 3 bottles of industrial-grade UV resin stabilizer to prevent fish fade. The stars. I raided the hobby aisle. I bought 230 individual, meticulously painted toy fish. Koi, guppies, little neon tetras. I bought handfuls of fake green moss and bright white plastic gravel to line the bottom. The total bill for the plastic marine life alone was shocking, but completely necessary for the integrity of the vision. Tools, trowels, levels, a propane torch to pop any surface bubbles, obviously, and a thick plastic sheet to protect the rest of the driveway from accidental spills. I pushed my cart, now rattling with gallons of toxic chemicals and hundreds of tiny, smiling plastic fish, toward the checkout. This led to Interaction 1, the bewildered hardware store employee. Brenda, a high schooler with purple hair and a look of profound boredom, scanned my items. Beep, beep, beep. She scanned the 7th gallon of epoxy. "Sir," Brenda said, her voice flat, "are you sure you want this much of the crystal clear? What are you sealing? A small ocean?" "Something like that, Brenda," I said, putting on my most serious, authoritative DIY voice. "I am engaged in a very specialized, high-density pavement encapsulation project. It requires volumetric fidelity and a perfect molecular bond." She squinted at the massive bag of gravel. "And the tiny fish?" I sighed, adjusting my imaginary glasses. "The fish, Brenda, are a bio-inclusionary aesthetic marker. They indicate the maximum hydrostatic pressure level for the structural epoxy during the curing phase." Brenda stared at me, then at the fish, then back at me. She clearly decided I was either a genius or severely mentally unwell, but either way, it wasn't her problem. "Okay, that'll be $487.14. I paid. $487.14, spent entirely on spite and polymers. The HOA was already costing me over $1,400, but this was an investment in emotional satisfaction. I drove home and immediately began Phase 1, preparation. First, I had to expand the pothole slightly. I needed clean, vertical edges for the epoxy to adhere perfectly. Using a rented concrete saw, which was terrifyingly loud, prompting a few worried glances from Patricia Stone's house, I squared off the hole into a neat, rectangular swimming pool, approximately 28 inches by 24 inches. It looked less like a hole and more like a minimalist drive-through bird bath. Next, I meticulously cleaned and vacuumed the area. Any dust would ruin the clarity. I spent an hour with a shop vac and a small paintbrush, treating the asphalt like it was a freshly sterilized surgical tray. Phase 2 was the decoration. This had to be perfect. I mixed the white gravel with a small amount of clear silicone adhesive and lined the bottom of the hole. I placed 3 clusters of plastic watergrass in the corners. It was starting to look like a tiny, abandoned garden display, but with a purpose. Then came the centerpiece, the fish. I laid them out on the garage floor, arranging them in schools. Some looked like they were swimming deep, others nearer the surface. I wanted a sense of motion. I wanted the illusion of water. I realized I needed a system to suspend them at different depths so they wouldn't all sink to the bottom when the resin was poured. My solution: thin, clear fishing line. I attached the lines to the top edges of the frame I had built around the pothole. I then carefully secured each fish at a predetermined depth. It looked like a macabre, plastic puppet show. I was working under the cover of night, using a single spotlight powered by an extension cord. I felt like a suburban art thief. At one point, my neighbor Jerry came out to take his dog for a walk. "Hey, Cal," Jerry whispered, squinting at the elaborate setup. "What in the Sam Hill are you building? Is that a tiny hot tub?" "It's a specialized drainage system, Jerry," I replied, in a low, serious tone, wiping a smear of asphalt dust from my cheek. "It's highly experimental, cutting-edge civil engineering. I'm afraid it's classified." Jerry, bless his trusting, simple heart, nodded slowly. "Ah, classified. Gotcha. Well, don't let Patricia see it. She'll classify you as a nuisance." "Too late, Jerry," I muttered. "Way, way too late." I went back to mixing the epoxy. The resin had to be mixed perfectly. Part A and Part B in an exact ratio, stirred gently for 3 minutes to avoid bubbles, and then left to rest before the pour. This was the point of no return. Once it was poured, it was permanent. It would be my legacy. It would be my middle finger to the HOA, encased in UV-stabilized high-density polymer. I checked the mixture one last time. It was perfectly clear, thick and ready. I took a deep breath, adjusted the fishing lines, and prepared for the final, irreversible action. The pour. This was it. The fate of my driveway and my bank account hung in the balance. The night of the pour felt like a high-stakes B-movie heist. The moon was a sliver. The only sound was the low hum of my ventilation fan. Epoxy fumes are no joke. And the distant, rhythmic ticking of the HOA fine clock in my head. Tick, tick. Another 75 cents. I began the pour. It was meticulous, high-stress work. I poured slowly, carefully, watching the thick, clear liquid flow around the plastic gravel and engulf the tiny, suspended fish. The effect was immediate and stunning. The resin was so clear that the plastic creatures looked like they were swimming, frozen mid-stroke in perfectly still water. "Hello, little plastic friends," I whispered, waving a hand over the surface. "Welcome to your permanent home. Hope you enjoy the low maintenance." My biggest fear was bubbles. Epoxy hates air. I worked with a propane torch, gently skimming the surface to pop any tiny bubbles that rose. The process of filling the hole took over an hour and a half, layer by layer, ensuring even distribution and preventing the fishing line from sagging. Finally, the surface was level, shimmering, and perfectly clear. The entire pothole was now an inert structural art installation. I stood back, exhausted and dizzy from the focus, and admired my handiwork. It was absurd. It was beautiful. It was, undoubtedly, a Class A violation of common sense. It was exactly what I needed. Set up the final UV lamps to kickstart the curing process, protecting the entire area with a makeshift tent of plastic sheeting and caution tape. The resin needed about 12 hours to cure enough to be touch dry, and another 72 hours for a full structural cure. I went to bed, a nervous wreck, dreaming of plastic fish and Patricia Stone wearing a hard hat. I was about 6 hours into the cure, around 4:00 a.m., when my dog, Buster, a Shih Tzu mix with the bark of a pit bull and the intelligence of a baked potato, started going absolutely ballistic. Woof, 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 woof. I stumbled out of bed, adrenaline pumping. Did a raccoon try to swim in the epoxy? Did one of the fishing lines snap? I peered out the window through the blinds, and that's when I saw the flashing blue and red lights. Not one light, but two. A patrol car and a very familiar, sensible navy blue sedan parked right behind it. President Patricia Stone had called the police. I threw on a pair of sweatpants, a stained hoodie, and a look of profound, victimized innocence. I stepped outside, just as Officer Miller, a massive man who looked like he'd seen one too many domestic disputes over mismatched recycling bins, was approaching the edge of my driveway. "Sir, I'm Officer Miller, North County PD," he said, his voice deep and monotone. "We received a report of unauthorized, possibly hazardous construction occurring at this address." Patricia Stone, bundled in a raincoat despite the lack of precipitation, emerged from behind the cruiser, holding her perpetually trembling clipboard like a shield. "Officer, this is him," Patricia hissed, pointing a manicured finger at me. "Mr. Thorne is clearly conducting an illegal operation. Look at the barriers, the fumes. He is damaging the structural integrity of the neighborhood. He must be arrested for destruction of property." "Ma'am, it's 4:00 a.m., Officer Miller said wearily, massaging his temples. "I'm sure he's just fixing his driveway." "Fixing it, officer? No. He's installing some kind of illicit water feature, or worse, burying hazardous materials. Look at the sheen. It's shimmering." Officer Miller turned back to me, his expression softening into one of pure, exhausted confusion. "Mr. Thorne, what exactly is under the plastic sheet?" This was it. The moment of truth. I had to maintain the most hilariously serious demeanor I could muster. "Officer, thank you for coming," I said, projecting sincerity. "I assure you, there's absolutely nothing illegal or hazardous happening here. I am simply applying a very expensive, specialized, non-structural, decorative, aesthetic coating to my private property." "A coating?" Patricia shrieked. "It's 6 inches deep, you lunatic!" "President Stone," I countered, turning to her with a smile that felt pure evil. "It is a deep pour coating. It's a specialty process. And it is entirely contained within the footprint of the damaged asphalt you fined me for." Officer Miller slowly walked toward the edge of the tented area. He lifted the plastic sheet slightly, peering down at the hardening, perfectly clear resin. He let out a sound that was half sigh, half chuckle. Are those fish?" "They are, officer," I confirmed proudly. "A school of plastic, aesthetically pleasing fish. They serve as a permanent UV-stabilized, high-fidelity inclusion. My solution to the Class A aesthetic violation. I am not pouring cement, I'm not digging a trench, and I am certainly not burying anything. I am, in fact, replacing the structural failure with a single, solid block of polymer rated for 40 tons, thus enhancing the surface integrity per the CCNRs." Patricia was apoplectic. Her voice was rising to a frantic, lawyerly squeal. "But it looks like water. It violates the water feature addendum." "Excuse me, officer," I interjected, looking gravely at the shimmering surface. "Does this smell like water to you? It's hard, solid plastic. It's a sculpture. If I painted a picture of a tree on my garage door, would I need a tree planting permit?" Officer Miller knelt down, his massive frame awkwardly hunched over the tiny, encapsulated pond. He touched the surface lightly. "It's hard, ma'am," he reported to Patricia. "And it is, technically, on his private property. And I'll be honest, Mr. Thorne." He looked up at me, fighting a smile. "It's certainly unique. Aesthetically pleasing, officer. That was the mandate," I reminded him. Patricia pulled a laminated copy of the HOA rules from her coat. "Section 8DI. Water features over 1 square foot require board approval." "Read the definition of water feature, Patricia," I instructed her, leaning against my front door frame. "It requires the continuous presence of a liquid medium. My feature contains 0 liquid. It contains solidified petroleum derivatives and plastic toys. It is a driveway resinscape, not a fountain. The argument went on for nearly 45 minutes. Cal maintaining his position as the victimized, highly technical homeowner, Patricia quoting obscure subsections of the CCRs, and Officer Miller acting as the increasingly amused referee in the most absurd neighborhood dispute he had ever encountered. Ultimately, the law was on my side. Mostly. I had replaced the damaged asphalt with a non-hazardous, structurally sound material. I hadn't violated any municipal codes. I had only violated the spirit of beige compliance. Officer Miller finally stood up, shaking his head. "Ma'am, I cannot issue a citation for this. He's technically fixed the pavement. The aesthetics are subjective. Now, Mr. Thorne," he looked me dead in the eye, "I am issuing a warning for the use of power tools after 10 p.m., which is a noise ordinance violation. Pay the $50 fine to the city and keep the resin quiet." "Understood, officer," I said, suppressing a triumphant laugh. $50 was a bargain compared to the initial $1,000 fine and the satisfaction of watching Patricia Stone's face turn puce. Officer Miller gave a quick salute, got back into his cruiser, and drove away, the car briefly pausing at the end of the street. I swear I saw him wipe a tear of laughter from his eye. Patricia Stone remained, staring at the translucent sheen with pure, undiluted hatred. "You haven't won, Thorne," she whispered, her voice dangerously low. "The board will convene an emergency session. This abomination will be dealt with." "Looking forward to the meeting, President Stone," I chirped, giving her a friendly wave. "Have a wonderful non-compliant day." I went back inside, poured myself a celebratory glass of lukewarm water, and waited for the sunrise. The epoxy was hardening. My victory was solidifying. The next morning, early November 2024, I felt like a ribbon-cutting ceremony was in order. After 24 hours, the epoxy was hard enough to safely remove the plastic sheeting and the wooden frame. I pulled back the plastic with a flourish. The sun hit the perfectly cured resin. It wasn't just clear. It was like thick, polished glass. The fish, the gravel, the moss, they were all suspended in time, shimmering and sparkling. The driveway koi pond was complete. It was a masterpiece of pettiness. It took about 30 minutes for the first cars to drive by, and the reaction was priceless. First, the beige brigade reacted. The Hendersons next door, a couple who measure their life success by the uniformity of their lawn, nearly drove off the road. Mr. Henderson stopped his car, backed up slowly, got out, and stared. He didn't say a word. He just shook his head, looking like he'd witnessed the collapse of Western civilization, and drove away. That's a win. Then came the curious. Sarah from down the street, driving her minivan, slowed down, rolled down her window, and shouted, "Cal, what in the world did you do?" "I fixed the pothole, Sarah, aesthetically," I shouted back, grinning. She burst out laughing. "It looks like a drive-up aquarium. My kids are going to lose their minds." Speaking of kids, about an hour later, 3 middle schoolers on bikes pulled up. They treated it like a roadside attraction. "Dude, are those real fish?" one asked, peering closely. "Nope, just plastic," I replied. "Immortal, maintenance-free fish." "That is sick," another kid declared, which, in the language of a 13-year-old, is the highest praise possible. Double win. I got supportive texts all morning, mostly from younger residents who were equally tired of the HOA's draconian rules. The general sentiment was split. 50%, that is incredibly petty, but brilliant. And 50%, this is the most visually stimulating thing to happen in Creekside in a decade. Just before lunch, the final boss arrived. Patricia Stone's navy blue sedan pulled up directly in front of my driveway, slightly blocking the street. A minor violation I ignored out of respect for the impending drama. She stepped out, her eyes blazing. She walked right up to the edge of the epoxy-filled hole, hands clasped behind her back, her posture rigid with contained fury. She stared down at the little plastic koi, clearly trying to find the flaw. "Thorne," she bit out, "I called an emergency session of the Architectural Review Committee this morning. We have determined that this blight is completely unacceptable." "And on what grounds, President Stone?" I asked, leaning casually against my garage door frame, sipping a cup of coffee. "I fulfilled your mandate. The structural integrity is restored. The area is level. I used a clear coating to showcase the high-quality aggregate below." She slammed her clipboard onto the hood of her car. "Don't play word games with me. We have voted. We are issuing a new violation, effective immediately, for 3 reasons. Violation number 1. Water feature construction without permit. Again, Patricia, it contains no water, I sighed, as if explaining gravity to a toddler. If I used a piece of paper that was blue, would you fine me for having an unpermitted sky? "It simulates a water feature," she retorted. "It creates the illusion of water. That is an aesthetic violation that brings the spirit of the CC&Rs into question." The spirit, Patricia? Is the spirit of the CC&Rs not also about maintenance and repair? I maintained and repaired my property with a durable, non-porous material. Violation number 2. Marine life violations. There is no marine life. They are plastic toys. I bought them at Hobby Lobby, I stated, pointing at a tiny, bright orange guppy near the edge. Is there a bylaw prohibiting the display of plastic toys on driveways? If so, I need to know, because little Jimmy across the street has a motorized plastic dinosaur fighting a plastic knight on his curb line right now. You're losing your credibility, Patricia. She looked physically pained. The display of artificial, non-seasonal novelty items in a permanent fashion is a breach of the general decor guidelines. Violation number 3. Excessive glare. Glare? I tilted my head. It's a sunny day. Everything is glaring. Are you suggesting I paint my entire property with non-reflective matte gray paint to appease your highly specific vision of non-glare compliance? The resin is highly reflective. It's a driving hazard. I walked over and put my hand flat on the smooth, cool surface. It's an anti-slip finish, Patricia. It reflects light, yes, but it's no different than a freshly waxed car, which I assume you're not fining every Saturday morning. Now, let's talk about the original fine. The $1,000 fine for the pothole itself. I pulled out my own laminated sheet, a single piece of paper I had prepared. Your fine schedule states that if the violation is remediated within 7 days, the initial assessment is waived and only the administrative fee applies. I received your notice on the 1st. I fixed the pothole on the 3rd. The original violation, the pothole, is gone. It no longer exists. I pushed the paper toward her. Where is the documentation stating the initial $1,000 fine is waived and only the $50 administrative fee remains? Because I've fixed the problem you fined me for. Patricia was breathing heavily, her face flushed. She had relied on me not fixing it, or fixing it with a quick, ugly asphalt patch that she could have nitpicked. She never anticipated this permanent, unnitpickable, aggressively aesthetic solution. She had focused entirely on issuing new fines for the fish, forgetting about the paperwork for the old fine. This is completely frivolous. This is a mockery of the association, she finally yelled, abandoning all bureaucratic calm. I agree, I said, dead serious. You fined me $1,000 for a hole that costs $50 to fill. That was the mockery. My solution is merely proportional aesthetic defiance. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered. Sarah, Jerry, and a few others stood across the street, watching the tennis match of bureaucratic insanity. Patricia knew she was beaten. The board would laugh her out of the room if she tried to enforce a glare fine when the initial violation was technically solved. She gathered her papers, her hand shaking. "The board," she said, her voice strained, "has decided to waive all fines, past and future, pending immediate cessation of any further driveway reimagination. We consider the matter closed, but rest assured, Mr. Thorne, we will be drafting a highly specific bylaw regarding the encapsulation of novelty toys in non-porous resin." "I look forward to reviewing it," I replied, with a victorious, friendly smile. She got into her car and sped away, the tires squealing slightly. A noise ordinance violation she surely didn't fine herself for. So that's how I won the great pothole war of 2024. I'm out about $1,450, the cost of the epoxy and fish, plus the $50 noise violation fine. But I avoided the $1,000 base fine and the accrued daily penalties, which, at that point, would have put me well into $20,500 territory. More importantly, the driveway koi pond became a minor local legend. People still slow down to look at it. The UPS guy takes pictures. The kids use it as a spot the plastic fish game. It's the only thing that gives our boring beige street any personality. And it drives Patricia Stone absolutely bonkers every time she pulls out of her driveway. She's had to train herself to look straight ahead. I find that deeply satisfying. I even added a small laminated sign near the curb, just to rub it in a little more. HOA approved aesthetic upgrade. Do not feed the resin fish. The irony is, my property value probably went up. Where else can you get an inert, non-slip, custom-poured, drivable art feature? The HOA did eventually pass that bylaw, Section 4.civ, which specifically prohibits the permanent exposed integration of decorative novelties or figurines into any load-bearing or paved surface. They even had a photo of my driveway attached as Exhibit A, the Cal Thorne incident. But the bylaw only applies to future driveways. Mine was grandfathered in. I am immune. The whole thing taught me a valuable lesson. If life gives you an asphalt pothole and a ridiculously overinflated fine from a petty neighborhood tyrant, don't just fill it with asphalt. Fill it with spite, bureaucratic leverage, and 230 plastic, aesthetically pleasing marine-themed polymers. It wasn't just a repair, it was an act of civil, suburban disobedience. It was my tiny, perfect, crystal-clear declaration of independence. And the best part? Just last week, I saw a little kid from down the street, one of the teens who called it sick, sneak up to my driveway. He didn't touch the epoxy, but he left a tiny, plastic, perfectly ridiculous starfish resting right on the curb next to the resin. The revolution, my friends, is fully cured.